This is completely unacceptable.
Unacceptable? What's unacceptable is your blatant disregard for the facts.
The glass fell like a bell struck by an unseen hand, rang once and exploded on the marble floor. This was a room that sold quiet. Soft lights warmed white cloths. Silverware lined up straight. Candle burned at each table. The vents whispered. Crystal glasses waited like clear bells ready to ring. Everything said wealth without needing to shout. At the window table sat Graham Vale, a banker who liked to own rooms. His watch flashed when he lifted his wrist. Across from him sat two clients, Ms. Porter and Mr. Delgado, there to judge him. They watched how he treated people as closely as they watched numbers. Beside the table stood Maya Lewis, the waitress. She carried a tray with 2 waters and a bottle of sparkling. Her uniform was neat, her posture straight, her eyes clear. She balanced care with speed, learned from long shifts. Graham looked at the clients, not at her. He wanted to show he was relaxed, funny, in charge. He raised his glass, gave a crooked smile, and made a sharp joke about Maya. It was not an accident. It was performance. The words meant to win laughter landed like stones. Maya felt the strike but did not move her face. She kept the tray level. 1 water slid, tapped another glass, and kept sliding. She reached to save it. It slipped past her fingers, kissed the table's edge, and fell. The sound of breaking was clean and bright. For a heartbeat, the room had no sound at all. The candle wavered and held steady. A couple at the next table stopped mid-bite. Rosa, the manager, looked up from the host stand and did not look away. Mr. Delgado's mouth tightened. Ms. Porter's brow made a small question. Is this who he is? Graham chuckled to cover the echo, as if a joke could sweep glass back into shape. Don't worry, he said too loudly. It's only water. His eyes flicked to the clients to measure the effect. He saw no admiration, only cooled interest like a door almost closed. Maya crouched. She gathered the large pieces first, then the bright dust that hides and cuts. The apron at her waist felt like a shield. Each shard held the candlelight in a broken way, and each shard still shone. She set them in a pan with careful hands. The room had glamour, linen, crystal, money, but the quiet dignity belonged to the woman on the floor. She did not argue. She did not plead. She protected the space with calm hands. She stood, wiped the wet circle from the marble, and rose to her full height. Graham tried another line, smaller this time. It fell flat. Ms. Porter reached for her water, then paused above the empty place where the glass had been. Mr. Delgado looked at Rosa and then at Maya, the look of someone who has just seen the test that matters. Maya set a new glass and poured without spill. Still sparkling, sir? She asked, voice even. It was not submission. It was control of herself. The hum returned. Dishes moved. Yet the air did not return to its old shape. Something had shifted, thin as a crack but real. Rosa took 1 step toward the table and stopped, weighing policy against conscience. Ms. Porter leaned back, noting both. Graham smoothed his tie and smiled a little too hard. He did not see that his watch had become a weight. Maya held the tray to her ribs like a quiet promise and waited for the next order. Silence fills the room, eyes fixed on her. The room was full, yet the silence pressed harder than any noise could. The broken glass had been cleared. The table was reset. Still, the insult lingered in the air like smoke no fan could move. The banker's laugh, sharp hollow, echoed once more in people's ears. He thought it proved control. To the room, it proved something else. Maya stood steady beside the table, apron tied tight. The cloth at her waist felt less like a uniform now, more like armor. She held her tray close, not to hide, but to protect her calm. Her silence was not weakness. It was choice. Around her, people shifted. Ms. Porter leaned back, her lips pressed thin. Mr. Delgado looked down at his wine, but did not taste it. Other diners bent their heads, forks frozen above plates, pretending not to hear what had already been heard. The banker filled the quiet with his own voice. He spoke about profits, about markets, about deals too large for ordinary people to understand. He laughed again, softer this time, but the sound no longer landed. The client's eyes did not shine. Their trust had tilted. Inside, Maya felt an old truth. Cruelty was not new. She had heard it before, in stores, in hallways, even from strangers passing in the street. It always carried the same message. You are less. She knew better. Her mother's voice still lived in her memory. Dignity is the one thing no one can steal unless you hand it over. So she did not hand it over. She stepped back once, leaving space between herself and the banker's shadow. She fixed her focus on the folded napkins, on the even lines of the tablecloth. She would not give him the gift of reaction. Her silence became its own kind of speech. Rosa, the manager, watched from the host stand. Her pen clicked once, then stopped. She measured the weight in the air. It was heavier than any broken rule she had seen before. The banker raised his glass high as if nothing had happened. He wanted applause. Instead, he met stillness. No one clapped. No one laughed. Only the steady flame of the table's candle stood with him, burning but fragile. The quiet stretched, long and tense. It sat on the banker's watch, on the client's hands, on Rosa's conscience. It rested on Maya's shoulders too, but she carried it with grace, and beneath that silence something shifted. A truth formed in the air. This moment would not pass unnoticed. Silence can hold for a time, but silence never lasts forever. The clock struck 5, and while most city streets were still half asleep, Maya was already moving. Her mornings began in silence. She packed her apron into a small bag, tied her hair neatly, and left her apartment before the sun touched the rooftops. The narrow hallway smelled faintly of cooking oil and dust, but she passed through it quickly, locking the door behind her. Inside, her younger brother Evan still slept, schoolbooks spread across the table. Supporting him was why she worked double shifts. Maya had grown up with less than most. Her father left early. Her mother took 2 jobs, and Maya learned to stretch small things, coins, food, patience. She discovered strength not in shouting, but in steady work. At school, she carried that same quiet resolve. When classmates mocked her clothes or her accent, she did not answer with anger. She told herself, "I will endure and I will rise." The restaurant was not her first place of labor. She had cleaned offices, folded laundry for strangers, and served late-night counters where no one remembered her face. Each job tested her in small ways. A supervisor once whispered that her smile was too forced. A customer once left no tip but wrote, "Be faster," on the receipt. These moments stung, but she refused to let them define her. Every insult was a stone. She placed it down and walked around it rather than carry it forever. Her mother's voice guided her. Dignity is the one coat no one can take from you. Hang it on your shoulders every day. Maya wore that invisible coat as faithfully as the apron she tied around her waist. At the restaurant, she had become known for precision. Plates never rattled on her tray. Drinks arrived full but never spilled. She noticed details others missed. The extra napkin a child needed. The quiet nod an anxious diner gave when ready for the check. Her silence was not emptiness. It was skill. It was focus. Still, she was not blind. She felt the small cuts of prejudice more times than she could count. A raised eyebrow when she spoke too confidently. A dismissive wave as if she were invisible. The slow look up and down, measuring her worth against the walls of the fine dining room. Each time she breathed once, reminded herself that worth is not decided by those who refuse to see it, and moved forward. What gave her strength was not only her own pride, but Evan's future. She wanted him to finish school, to study without fear of debt, to walk into rooms where he would not have to bow his head. For that, she bore long hours and sharp words. She believed survival was not enough. Dignity was survival with meaning. Yet on nights when the restaurant emptied and she walked home alone, a question followed her through the streets. How long can one endure being treated as less? The watch on his wrist ticked like a secret he refused to hear. Graham Vale sat tall at the table, shoulders square, suit pressed to perfection. The crystal glass in front of him caught the candlelight, and he liked how it seemed to mirror his own shine. He told himself the silence after his joke was nothing. A pause, that was all. He believed silence would bend to his voice, as it always had. He had built his career on bending rooms. Years earlier, he was just another analyst, buried under numbers, learning how money spoke louder than manners. He discovered quickly that charm was a tool, arrogance a weapon, and timing a shield. He rose fast. At every step, he believed respect was not earned but demanded. Now, as a senior banker, Graham wore power like a second suit. He measured his worth in dinners like this, lavish, expensive, staged. He believed clients trusted confidence more than truth, and he gave them plenty of it. The watch was his prize, a rare piece worth more than some people's yearly salary. Its steady tick usually soothed him, proof that time was his to command. Tonight, though, it felt louder. It reminded him, without mercy, that time never truly belonged to anyone. He ignored it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to draw the clients closer. He spoke about markets, profits, futures only he could see. He gestured with sharp hands, filling the air with numbers dressed as promises. But the flicker in the client's eyes told another story. They were not as impressed as he needed them to be. Graham pressed harder. He ordered the best wine, dropped phrases like exclusive deal and inside track. He laughed louder, hoping volume would mask the crack in the moment. He thought dominance could erase discomfort. Across the table, Miss Porter listened but did not smile. Mr. Delgado's hand tapped once against his glass, a signal of impatience. Neither offered the admiration Graham craved. Still, he could not see his danger. To him, their silence was respect. To him, Maya's calm was submission. He mistook stillness for surrender. The contrast between them could not have been sharper. Graham, surrounded by wealth, clung to the illusion of control. Maya, in her plain apron, carried the strength of endurance. One chased status like air. The other held dignity like stone. But Graham could not read that contrast. He was too focused on his own performance. He adjusted his tie, straightened his cuff, and told himself the room still belonged to him. The watch on his wrist ticked again, steady, cold, a sound that asked questions he refused to answer. He smiled wider, even as the clients' faces cooled further. He believed wealth was armor and arrogance was proof. In his mind, the game was his. No one would dare break it, and so he told himself, with complete certainty, no one will ever challenge me. The sound of cutlery clinking against porcelain became sharper than glass breaking. Around Graham's table, the restaurant returned to its rhythm, but the rhythm was off. Conversations were low, movements careful, as if no one wanted to disturb what had just happened. The waiter at the far corner polished the same glass twice. A couple near the bar whispered, glancing toward the banker's table and then quickly away. The air had changed. Maya carried the tray back to the service station, her steps even. She did not rush. She did not falter. She placed the tray down, folded her cloth, and drew one breath. Her apron still wrapped her like armor. She would not break, but she could feel the weight of every eye that had watched her humiliation. At the banker's table, Graham pressed on, talking louder than before. He spoke of markets and risks, of growth charts only he could read. He poured his confidence across the table like wine, hoping to drown the silence that clung to the clients. But silence has its own voice. Miss Porter leaned slightly toward Mr. Delgado. Her words were too soft for Graham to hear. His voice rolled on, smooth and heavy, while their quiet exchange cut underneath. A pause, a nod. The first crack in his control. The candle between them trembled. Its flame bent, then stood again, fragile but unbroken. The flicker drew Maya's eye as she passed by with new glasses. To her, it looked like truth itself, shaken but still alive. Rosa, the manager, stood at the host's stand. Her hand held a pen, her thumb pressing the clip until it clicked. She knew her duty was to protect the staff. She also knew the banker was a client too valuable to lose. Her eyes shifted from Maya's steady back to Graham's polished watch. Policy pulled one way, profit another. She hesitated. The room sensed it. Respect was thinning, thread by thread. Diners exchanged glances. The couple near the window shifted their chairs as if the space itself had grown uncomfortable. Graham laughed, but the laughter hit the air like a dull blade. Maya returned to his table. Her hands were steady as she refilled water, steady as she set down a plate. She said nothing, gave nothing except the dignity of flawless service. She retreated again, but her retreat was not surrender. It was refusal to let his insult define her, the clients noticed. Mr. Delgado's eyes followed her as she moved across the room, quiet, composed, stronger than the insult meant to shrink her. Miss Porter folded her napkin slowly, her lips pressed thin. Their unease grew, and with it their respect for Maya, not for the man trying to impress them. Graham, blind to the shift, leaned back. He tapped his watch, the metal face catching the candlelight. To him, time was still his ally. He believed the silence meant control. He did not see that silence was building against him, not for him. The candle flickered again. This time the flame nearly went out before pulling itself upright. Fragile, yes, but persistent. It glowed in the eyes of the clients. It glowed in the glance Rosa gave Maya. The clinking cutlery became a chorus of judgment, not loud but steady. Every plate set down, every fork lifted seemed to mark his arrogance. Maya walked past once more. She did not look at him, but the set of her shoulders spoke louder than words. Dignity does not need a voice to be heard. The crack in the room was open now, running from the candle's flame to the manager's conscience, from the waitress's silence to the client's gaze. And then, in that charged stillness, someone decided to act. The first crack of truth came not with a shout, but with a whisper at the banker's table. Ms. Porter leaned forward, her eyes steady. "Mr. Vale," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "we need to address what just happened." The words froze Graham mid-sentence. He had been describing quarterly gains, his tone smooth, his smile rehearsed. He blinked, then chuckled as though brushing off dust. "Oh, let's not overthink it. We're here for business, not—" Mr. Delgado cut in, his voice quiet but firmer than hers. "Business depends on trust, and trust dies when respect is missing." The room tilted. The words were not shouted, but every diner nearby seemed to hear them. Forks paused midair. A glass stopped halfway to lips. Rosa, standing at the host stand, felt her chest tighten. The air had shifted from unease to judgment. Graham forced a laugh. "You're making this bigger than it is." His hand slid over the receipt slip that lay on the table, signed moments before with a heavy, careless stroke. He tapped it once with his finger, as if a name in ink could still command authority, but the slip betrayed him. The signature was bold, arrogant, rushed. It told the truth of a man who thought details didn't matter, who believed people were props, who trusted his position more than his character. What he had written in arrogance now sat on the table like evidence. Rosa stepped closer. She had no script for this moment, but silence was no longer safe. Eyes from other tables were on her, waiting. Her voice was steady, though her heart beat fast. "Sir," she said, "we do have a policy against disrespecting staff." Graham waved her off with the flick of his hand, the same gesture he used for waiters, the same one he thought ended conversations. "Please, we're all fine here." But they were not. Maya stood near the service station watching. She did not move closer, but her presence lingered like the candlelight across the room. Quiet, steady, impossible to ignore. She folded her hands in front of her apron. Her silence spoke of restraint, of dignity still intact. Ms. Porter lifted the receipt slip between her fingers. The paper trembled slightly in the candle's flicker. "This tells me something," she said. "You sign without care. You speak without care. If this is how you treat people you believe are beneath you, why should we believe you treat clients with honesty?" A murmur passed through the diners. A single phrase had pulled back the curtain. The illusion of Graham's control was breaking. He leaned back, his smile straining, his watch glinting under the lights. "You misunderstand me. I'm a man of results. Results without respect," Mr. Delgado said, "are worthless." The tension grew heavier, pressing against Graham's shoulders. He adjusted his tie, but his usual armor no longer held. The clients were not leaning in anymore. They were leaning away. Rosa did not retreat to the host stand. She stayed rooted. The flame of the candle bent again under the soft air, fragile but alive. It seemed to mark the moment. Truth, nearly smothered, rising back. Graham's voice faltered. He tried again, louder, but his words carried no weight. His authority was slipping. Piece by piece, in front of strangers, in front of clients, in front of the woman he had mocked. The signed slip, once just a formality, now lay between them like a verdict. And in that charged silence, it became clear his authority had begun to crumble. The words that once earned him laughter now returned as a blade against him. Graham Vale sat straighter in his chair, forcing a smile he no longer felt. The room's warmth had shifted to ice. His clients, once his audience, now sat like judges. Every sound, the clink of glasses, the scrape of chairs, echoed like a gavel. Miss Porter leaned forward, her eyes calm but sharp. "Do you remember what you said to her?" she asked. Her voice was not raised, yet it cut through the air. Graham waved his hand as if brushing dust. "It was nothing. A joke, Mr. Delgado shook his head. That joke was cruelty. And it tells us everything about how you see people. The banker's own words replayed in the room, no longer wrapped in arrogance, but repeated as evidence. Diners who had half listened before now looked directly at him. His voice, once the center of power, had become proof of his downfall. The receipt slip still lay on the table, his bold signature marking it like a stain. The candle beside it burned steady now, its flame no longer trembling. Truth had surfaced, and it would not retreat. Graham adjusted his tie. It had always been his badge of control. Silk, flawless, a mark of wealth. But as he tugged at it, it no longer looked like armor. It looked like a rope tightening around a man with no escape. He pulled it looser, his fingers trembling, and the gesture exposed what he had worked so hard to hide. Fear. Rosa, the manager, stood nearby. Her silence had ended. Our staff deserves respect, she said firmly. Tonight, that respect was broken. Her words carried weight, not only for Maya, but for everyone listening. Graham laughed again. But it was hollow now, the laugh of a man trying to cling to what had already slipped away. Let's be serious. You can't possibly end a business deal over her. Every diner felt the weight of that word, her. The dismissal. The reduction. Ms. Porter's face hardened. That word, she said, is exactly why we are ending this business. The clients rose together, their decision as quiet as it was final. We cannot trust a man who mocks dignity, Mr. Delgado said. If you belittle those who serve you, you will betray those who trust you. The verdict had been spoken. The room held its breath. Graham reached for his watch, the symbol of his rise, but even its shine mocked him now. Time, once his ally, had become his enemy. Each tick sounded like a countdown. He tried again. You don't understand. I deliver results. No, Ms. Porter answered, standing tall. You deliver arrogance. We will not fund arrogance. With that, they turned. Their chairs pushed back with a sharp scrape, the sound echoing louder than his words. Every eye in the restaurant followed them. Every ear heard what silence said. His reign had ended. The tie around his neck hung loose now, no longer sharp, no longer proud. It exposed him. Without the mask of polish, he was not untouchable. He was ordinary, and ordinary could fall. The phone in his pocket buzzed. He stepped aside, pressing it to his ear. His boss's voice was low, but its meaning was clear. The clients had already called. The news had traveled faster than he could imagine. When he returned to the table, his face was pale. His watch ticked, his tie drooped, and his words were gone. Within minutes, less time than it takes a candle to burn down an inch, his job, his reputation, and his illusion of control collapsed. And all that remained was the silence of a man who had mocked dignity and lost everything to it. The broken glass was gone, but the memory of its shatter still lived in the room. Maya moved with quiet grace, clearing plates, pouring water, resetting tables. She did not hurry, nor did she falter. To anyone watching, she looked the same as before, steady, professional, calm. Yet every step she took carried more weight than the banker's loudest words had ever held. The candle on Graham's table burned lower now. Its flame was smaller, but it did not die. Like truth itself, it remained, fragile yet unbroken. Where his voice had filled the air with arrogance, her silence had left something stronger. Respect. Diners who had witnessed the moment watched her closely. Some gave her nods of quiet support. A couple near the back left a generous tip with a note folded under the bill. Dignity wins. She tucked it into her apron pocket, not as money earned, but as proof that people had seen her strength. Rosa approached her during a pause between tables. You handled yourself with grace, she said. Her voice carried relief, even pride. He lost control. You never did. Maya only nodded. Words felt unnecessary. She knew the truth already. Dignity was never loud, but it was lasting. At the service station, she picked up a clean glass and set it carefully on a tray. The action was simple, but it carried meaning. The broken one had been swept away, yet its sound still echoed. She understood now, some breaks leave marks not to weaken but to remind. Graham was gone. His expensive tie, once pulled tight, had hung loose as he left the room in defeat. His clients had walked out first, their judgment final. He had walked out last, his authority stripped away not by force but by the simple refusal of others to accept his arrogance. His fall had been swift, almost silent, Yet everyone knew it had happened. Maya, by contrast, remained. She moved table to table with quiet endurance. She did not need to announce victory. It lived in the calm rhythm of her work. The contrast was sharp, his status destroyed in minutes. Her dignity intact after years of being tested. As she placed the new glass on a table, she caught her reflection in its surface, clear, steady, whole. She realized then that silence was never weakness. Silence could carry truth longer than noise. And when the moment was right, truth always found its voice, whether spoken aloud or shown in action. The restaurant returned to its natural rhythm. Cutlery clinked, voices rose. The hum of ordinary life resumed. But beneath it all, her presence still shaped the air. The quiet way she carried herself had become louder than Graham's downfall. When the night ended, Maya untied her apron and folded it neatly. She walked toward the back door, her steps firm, her head high. Each footfall echoed in the hall, steady, certain. And those steps measured, unshaken, spoke louder than the collapse of a man who thought no one could ever challenge him. Arrogance had left the room, but dignity remained. The banker's name slipped quickly into silence. Within days, his fall became another whispered story in offices and boardrooms, an example of pride collapsing under its own weight. His clients moved on, his colleagues distanced themselves, and his reputation faded into irrelevance. The restaurant, however, carried a different memory. Staff spoke not of the banker's insult, but of Maya's composure. Rosa reminded her team of it during meetings. That is what strength looks like. Diners who had witnessed the night recalled not the cruelty, but the calm with which it was answered. At closing, Maya wiped down the last table. The room was quiet now, chairs stacked, silverware polished, glasses lined in rows. The air carried no tension, only the steady hum of work complete. On one table, a single candle still burned. Its flame was small, steady and sure, like the truth she had carried. She paused beside it, watching how it refused to flicker even in the draft of the closing door. The candle was simple, unremarkable, but its endurance held meaning. Power built on noise had died quickly. Dignity, though quiet, had endured. The contrast was clear. Graham's wealth and pride had crumbled in minutes, yet Maya's silence had outlasted him. Stronger than any insult, stronger than any performance. His tie had loosened in defeat, while her apron had remained a shield of steady service. Maya untied that apron now, folding it with care. She felt no triumph in his ruin, only a deep reminder. Arrogance burns fast, but respect burns long. She had not shouted, yet her silence had spoken. She had not fought for dominance, yet dignity had won. The candle burned lower, the wax nearly gone, but the flame stayed upright. It did not need to be loud to prove its strength. Maya turned off the lights, her steps slow and steady. The restaurant settled into darkness, but that one flame lingered until the very last moment, steady against the shadows. Justice, she knew, does not always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a candle refusing to die. And when it does, it feels final, certain and enough.